Hey everybody, this is Dan,
And this is Ron.
and this is a nominee questionable movies. And
Welcome.
today we're talking about a very heavily questioned movie.
Yes,
You want to introduce it, Ron?
it is called All About Steve. It stars Sandra Bullock and Bradley Cooper. It's got Jung in it. It's got Thomas Hayden Church, or is it Thomas Church Hayden? Did I say it right?
Thomas Hayden Church,
Okay. And some other people. What's his name?
DJ Qualls,
DJ Qualls, and
Charlene Yee shows up for like 2 seconds.
it's
I
got.
think that other reporter was on the Daily Show back then, but I can't remember his name.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And it's got. Let's see. Is it Katie Nixon? I think it's Katie Nixon, who's the star of a sitcom right now. Yeah, that's her. I'm trying. It's like All American Family or American Housewife. That's what it's called. So she's on that. So she's in it too. But yeah. So the plot. Mary.
This came out in 2009.
Oh yes. That's important because it's well into Sandra Bullock's career. Heavily panned movie, unfairly heavily panned movie. But basically, Mary she writes crossword puzzles for the local Sacramento newspaper. She is wicked smart. She knows everything about everything, even multiple languages. She's also very manic. She doesn't stop talking constantly. She dresses in this very eclectic style. She's always wearing these big red boots. But anyways, she goes on a blind date with this guy who's a news reporter. Or no, he's not the reporter.
The cameraman.
Yeah, he's the cameraman. And she like pounces on him. She immediately like falls in love with him, and they're halfway into having sex in the car. And it's basically clear that she thinks that they're destined to be together for life. Well, she says that.
Yeah.
And he was like, he freaks out about that. But he had said and finally he suddenly makes an excuse and leaves. But he said, it's lonely on the road. It'd be nice to if you were there, or to have someone with you, or if you were there, or something like that. And she latches onto that. So he goes off to one place with there's the reporter, and I guess the producer, who's King.
Kim Jong. Not Kim Jong.
Yeah,
Kim Jong. Wow, that was a fuck up.
No, I did the same thing. I was about to say Ken
Jong.
Yeah, from Community. Thomas Hayden Church is the reporter, and they're awful. They keep screwing stuff up. He wants to be the anchor man, and they're actually close to getting fired. But they go from disaster to disaster in different places around the country, and she follows them. She keeps trying to catch on, and he, of course, she's stalking him, and he's trying to like get away from her. And she's constantly talking the whole time. She's constantly talking on a bus, and they drop her off. They stop. The bus driver stops, opens the door. She gets off thinking it's the stop. They close the door and drive off and leave her behind. So then she hitchhikes with a truck driver and all that. But anyways, eventually there's one of the disasters. Oh, and she meets DJ and Katie Mixon at one of the news places.
Right, the protest for the three-legged baby.
Yes, they're the three-legged baby, and the big thing is that the parents, one parent wants to amputate, and the other parent wants to keep the leg. So there's the pro leg and the the pro leg and the anti-leg protesters or supporters. So she ends up joining one of them because they have better snacks. But so she hangs out with two of them, and they end up going with her to drive her to Galveston, which is where Steve and the rest of the crew. Then they go to the next place, and eventually one of the places has a sinkhole, and there's all these kids that are down in the mine, deaf kids. So the kids are all taken out, and they're reporting, and Steve has the camera facing towards the hole. Mary sees him, starts running towards him. He's a little freaked out, and she's running and falls down the hole. So then there's another kid down there, and eventually she figures out how to get out of there. They all make it out. Thomas Hayden Church has actually jumped in there to try and save them too eventually, because he feels bad. He's the one that actually, he kept telling her that Steve was in love with her but was afraid, emotionally and all that. So he was egging her on. That's why she kept following. So, but anyway, she makes it out. She also realizes she's actually self-aware. She knows, she has a hard time with people ask her why you're like this and why you're like this, because she's just so eccentric and so, well, kind of off kilter. But she knows, she realizes that Steve is in love with her. And then she's the hero because she's actually the one that saves the kid. She saves the kid and the reporter. So,
right, because he jumps down the well to follow her because he feels guilty because it's sort of his fault that she's in the well in the first place.
right, and he grabs onto a fire hose because there's a fire truck there. He grabs onto the fire hose to jump and save them, and he goes down, and the fire hose is not connected to the fire truck, so he falls in, and the fire hose follows. But she figures out a way to get them out. So, but also it makes him out to be the hero. So, and he gets the anchor desk job. But she's the hero. Everybody suddenly loves her. Bradley Cooper apologizes, and that's the end of the movie. Did I get it all? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot. It's hard to convey because it's a really dense script.
It is.
Like, there's jokes every second. There's background jokes. There's just like things that are free. Like, I was laughing so hard I almost hyperventilated. Like, I'm not even joking at points. Like, it was.
Yeah, I was, at least for the first half hour, 45 minutes, I was laughing nonstop.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time that I laughed that much in a movie. Actually, I told you I watched the Muppets, the one with Jason Segel and Amy Adams, and I was actually laughing, like, every so often I had there were some great laughs, and I was laughing out loud. But this was this was nonstop, and it was too. I had to stop at one point because I was over laughed.
Yeah. I was like, I just started feeling a little dizzy about 50 minutes in because I was just like, okay, breathe. And so I guess we should talk a little bit about the reception when this came out, because that was like, at least in terms of public perception, that's the most noteworthy part of this movie, is that this was almost considered the end of Sandra Bullock's career. This got like the worst reviews, I think, of 2009. Like, you were telling me it had 6% on Rotten Tomatoes.
6%, yeah.
And I remember just like reading the reviews when it came out. I was like, oh my God, this is like You Got Served, right? Like, this is going to be an amazing bad movie. And so it was on one of those video on demand things, because that was like right around when we first had that on the TV at my parents' house. And I watched it. I was expecting it to be like, maybe like funny bad, and I was blown away the first time I watched it, because I don't know if I can think of another movie where I'm in quite as much disagreement with the general consensus.
Yeah, watching this, I can see why people thought it was so bad, why people panned it, but they were wrong. They were
totally wrong. Yeah, because you got a great script. Like, I would say 95% of the gags work, which is unheard of, especially like 2000s era comedy. A lot of the major comedies that were considered like when I saw The Hangover, I was not like, it's a funny movie, but it's not some kind of modern masterpiece like people were kind of making it out to be. Or like, there's some good laughs in there, but I don't think on the whole it's not a movie that I'm necessarily going to go back to. And
this or The Hangover?
The Hangover.
Okay.
Now, this I could probably watch again tonight. This was like so
yeah.
And yeah, I don't think like the late 2000s, early 2010s era of film comedy. Granted, I was not watching a lot of new movies around then. There's like stuff that's a bit more sophisticated, but I don't think I laughed as hard at any movie from that period as this one.
Yeah, I definitely like The Hangover. I didn't laugh as much.
I didn't laugh nearly as much at that.
And honestly, I rewatched The Hangover, I don't know, a year or two ago, and it didn't hold up. Like, Zach Galifianakis, for example, was great. Zach Galifianakis is great in everything.
Right.
And you've seen Two Ferns, Between Two Ferns.
Oh yeah, Between
right?
Two Ferns is great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious. So he's hilarious in everything when he wants to be funny, which is usually.
And he can do serious like fairly well too, because there was that movie that was written and directed by Matt Weiner, the guy who created Mad Men, where it's like him and oh god, I just watched this like 2 months ago. How am I forgetting all this? But basically, he's like mentally ill. He can't admit it, and his best friend, who's played by Owen Wilson, is like
Oh, I know what
trying
you're
to
talking about.
protect him from the outside world. I thought it was a pretty decent movie. That one got like
Yeah, yeah.
middling reviews, but Galifianakis showed some pretty good serious acting chops in that movie.
And he was good with the pathos in it.
Yeah,
I don't mean
and
that disparagingly. I think, because sometimes you say, oh, a lot of pathos or whatever. I don't know. Like, no. He was good with the pathos
yeah,
and
he could go
funny.
serious, which
Yeah.
is like which was surprising. Yeah, like
Right.
and in this movie, like granted, you have people who have proven that they have very good comedic chops. Like I don't think anybody doubts that Sandra Bullock is a very good comedic actress.
Yeah.
But like Thomas Hayden Church in this movie, oh my god, that guy's fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
He knocks it out. Everybody's firing on all cylinders in this movie.
Uh-huh.
It felt like.
Yeah. There's one scene in which Thomas Hayden Church and Bradley Cooper, they're in the van on the way to another disaster, and they're bickering and they're having a fight, and they're just like two little kids, and suddenly like Ken Jeong, not Kim Jong, Ken Jeong just suddenly yells and tells them to stop and starts putting them in their place. He's suddenly the adult in the room. When ever in movie history, TV history, anything that he's appeared in, he's never been the adult in the room as far as I recall. So that was even funny too, the way that was reversed.
Yeah, like besides Bradley Cooper, I think almost everybody in this movie is cast against type. Like Sandra Bullock is not usually. I mean, I guess she does play like kind of quirky but charming women, but
Miss Congeniality.
Yeah, but this is sort of taking it to a whole other level.
Yeah.
And it does feel like if I was just judging on the script, I would think it was against type, but she does an amazing job in this movie.
Yeah, and it's consistent. She just is constantly at that same level.
And she's got like, I mean, I think all of them. I didn't realize she had that kind of physical comedy chops. If that wasn't a stunt double, like all the shots of people falling into that sinkhole were hilarious.
Yeah.
And they repeated that gag like 3 or 4 times, but it just
the gag in which they took the video of her falling in, but then they rewound it so that she was popping back out, and then she's falling in again, and then they rewind it so she's popping back out several times, and then
right, there's that awful animation
again
of her falling down the well at the news station that they play like 3 or 4 times.
Oh, right. Different versions. One in which she hits the side and falls down upside down on her head and dies. Another one when everybody knows that there's the little girl who's deaf that they left behind somehow. Now then they change it so that she falls down, but she lands on her feet next to the little girl, and they have different variations on it, alive or not alive. But yeah, this is hilarious.
Like there's background dialogue that I was picking up and just like bursting out. Like there's just like so much good comedic language in this script.
Yeah, and it was consistent. And at some point, it became when she's in the well and she's actually like coming up with the contraption to using physics to make it out of there, because the crane fell down, the sinkhole got larger and the ground fell down a bit, and it can all collapse at any point. But the crane that was used to pull out the kids was now useless. But she figured out a way to get out of there and got them all. But at that point of the scene, it was no longer like laugh out loud funny. It was a little more, I'll say not serious, not too serious, a little tear jerky, but punctuated with some funny things. Yeah, there was some suspense there, but punctuated with some hilarious moments.
But I think the comedy in that scene, a lot of times, like the only point in the movie where I was like, this seems completely out of character and kind of weird, was when Bradley Cooper's being interviewed. The news thinks that Mary is his girlfriend, and he suddenly has that like moment where it's like, he's saying all these things he likes about her when like 30 minutes earlier he was throwing potato chips at the side of the van because he thought she'd poisoned them.
Yeah.
And it was so funny.
Well, he suddenly he realized that she's a good person because it's some. Well, no, he saw her fall, obviously, but people think that she jumped in there to save the girl. But yeah, he's. I think. Well, do you think it was out of character? I think he just finally had a realization that she was a good person. And
yeah, I think like he plays it well. It seems a little bit abrupt. There's not a lot of build up to it, but at the same time, like you don't. And I think like how long was this movie? It was like 90 minutes.
Yep.
And I think that's a strength of the movie because a lot of those like right after Judd Apatow got huge with 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up, there was this tendency in comedy movies to make like 2-hour and 10-minute comedy movies, which is a long comedy movie.
Right.
And this is just like punchy. Like there's not really any dead time in this movie.
Yeah, it was no longer than it needed to be. It was like it was just the right length. We're talking about this as if this was a modern classic. It's not a modern classic. But it's a really funny. It was a good movie.
Really funny, and I think like the criticisms at the time, which were kind of understandable. So I have not read the reviews since they came out, but I remember at the time a lot of it was either Sandra Bullock is making fun of mentally ill people or the movie is romanticizing stalking, which I mean, the script even outright acknowledges it. Like they call her a stalker multiple times. There's not like it's not like a standard romantic comedy where the guy's acting like a stalker and everything's framed like, oh, okay, he just loves me enough to stalk me.
Yeah, we're not rooting for her.
No.
We're enjoying the ride, but we know also that like, wow, you really shouldn't be doing this. And we're waiting for that realization for it to like, for her, we want it to happen near the end because we want it to continue. But we're waiting for that moment in which she stops and realizes that no, she's stalking him, or it's not going to work out at least.
And she does kind of, because like the end of it, like because at the time it was considered incredibly offensive, but in retrospect, I feel like there's a lot of things that they got right that most romantic movies. And I should mention we're recording this on Valentine's Day. That's why we chose this movie because Ron was like, Dan, what's a kind of fucked up romantic movie? And I was like, oh my god, All About Steve.
Yeah. We went through a few things. We're actually going online and we're both doing Google searches for twisted rom-coms, dark romantic comedies, and all sorts of things. And we landed on this.
And
as a reminder, we're both single.
I'm very single. I am the most single I have been in 6 years.
Yeah. Not me. I've been single. For 6 years. I've been single for as long as you were in a relationship.
Right. And it's so get it while it's hot, ladies, I guess.
Oh wait, that means that you started dating. Your last relationship started right around the time that I got divorced.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. So if we add the two, it was continuous, right? When my divorce happened, so my relationship ended, your relationship started. So like, it's continuous, just with different people.
Yeah. So this is a once in a decade opportunity.
Yeah.
When both pod hosts, we're available. I don't think I've ever looked sexier. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ron, but I'm looking in the Zoom window. I would fuck me, and
Dan is sporting that Karl Marx look. His beard. Is this as long as you've ever had it?
No. It's been,
it was longer at one time.
The worst it ever got was like, I didn't shave for, I think 4 months. And it started turning into like almost like dreadlocks.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about. It starts to
And
curl up and get really tight. It's like George the cat. He was matted in the back, and it was really hard to get out the matting. And I got the little ones, but there were a few big ones, and I took him to
right,
the
I'm
vet
like
for.
licking my lips and getting hairballs. And
uh,
but yeah, so there's the parts of the movie that were found offensive, and in retrospect, I think there was a presumption of a lack of self-awareness in the script that isn't actually there.
It was very self-aware.
Yeah, and there are things that it gets very right, like when Mary kind of has her into the kind of Joseph Campbell hero's journey, self-actualization when she gets out of the well.
Uh-huh.
He does have the scene with Bradley Cooper where he kind of is like, oh, okay, I kind of understand you, and I respect you for what you are now. There's no implication that there's a romantic relationship. When she gets herself out of the well, she's not like a damsel in distress. She's like a damsel in distress, like flipped on its head.
Right.
And I think the movie does a very good job distinguishing some of the more, because she's clearly got Asperger's, like 110%.
Yes. Right. We talked.
Um,
Yeah, and I think I'd add. I think it's a combination of Asperger's and mania.
yeah, and in terms of movies about, or like television about that, I think it does a really good job distinguishing between the subtleties of the behavior, because like part of Asperger's is getting intensively obsessed with subjects. If you don't get it under control and you have like unmet emotional needs, sometimes that can be people and that can turn into a bad situation.
Right.
But at the same time, they're not making her out to be some kind of psycho killer. Like there's no like horror movie shots in this movie. They're not making her into some kind of grotesque. And you eventually do realize, like, even though she's acting like a lunatic, it's not out of malice. It's just out of like a lack of ability to read social cues or understand the kind of social rules of engagement.
Right.
And I guess like with the Asperger's cues, we should probably go through like the boots thing, wearing the same clothes, or like kind of having a uniform. Like I wore basically a button down and khakis for 10 straight years, give or take.
When I took a leave of absence at my last job for a while, and when I came back, different role, I bought 12 black t-shirts, and I have several pairs of jeans. They're the same jeans. I found one pair that I like and it fits well, and that's what I always get. Oh, I didn't think about that as maybe a symptom. But
Yeah.
every day at work, I wore a black t-shirt and blue jeans. It wasn't the same shirt I had 12 t-shirts, 12 black
Right,
t-shirts. So I wore different ones.
You
But I
know,
had a
like, I
uniform.
used to call it Batman closet. Like I had a case of Batman closet where like you open my closet and it's like 12 of the same outfit.
Yeah. I hung the shirts on I had them on hangers. They weren't just folded, they were on hangers. So yeah, same. If you opened my closet, you would see a bunch of black t-shirts next to each other. I never thought about that. I mean, I wore them, I was very aware. I wore them intentionally as a uniform. I wanted them to be, when I came back to the company, I had like different thoughts about it, and I didn't think well of management and all that, and their not philosophy, what's their morals, their ethics. But so it was a way of separating somewhat and say, here's my work uniform. On the weekends, I'll wear like the me stuff. But at work, it's a uniform.
Yeah, and I think that's like part of Asperger's is being like comforted by kind of arbitrary rituals.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm trying to think. There's an Asperger. There's a kid with Asperger's that shows up in Degrassi like way late in the run, and like the way they introduce him as having Asperger's is he just kind of presumes there's this seat in the classroom that's supposed to be his when there's no assigned seating, and he's just like, "Why are you in my seat? I want my seat." And
holy moly, I was like that.
Yeah.
At my last job, when we'd have company meetings, I always sat third row, right section, because it was like between all the seats, there was an aisle in the middle. Third row, left end of the right side. So I was right next to I wasn't on the first row, exposing too much, and I was right next to the aisle. So it was also a way of easily asking questions. It was only towards the end when I was really like disappointed with the ethics of management that I sat further in and kind of like blended in and stopped asking questions. Oh my God, Dan. So there were two things about me and the spectrum. One of them, when I was with my ex, a couple of times he said in a pejorative way that I probably had undiagnosed Asperger's. And then the other thing was, you once showed me a test.
Oh yeah, the Aspie quiz.
The Aspie quiz, and when I took it, and it came out that on a bunch of things I was it neuroatypical? Is that the right word?
Yeah, neuroatypical, because the Aspie quiz, it doesn't necessarily, if you get like a highly positive result on that, I mean, you were like within 20 points of me.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean Asperger's, because like ADHD is very closely related to Asperger's, and there's a lot of misdiagnosis on both sides of one being the other.
Right. And it was only about a year and a half ago that I was finally diagnosed with ADHD. I finally, I took something from the World Health Organization. They have a preliminary questionnaire, and it's not like, okay, this means you have it. It was a preliminary questionnaire, and if you score a certain amount, then you're if you answer like a high level on certain things, different questions, then it's like, okay, next you talk to a professional and all that. Don't just take it immediately. I took it and I scored, like, out of all these questions, I was like, almost all of them I scored high, and I was like, what the hell? But I took it to my psychopharm and showed it to her, and it's like, I'm not sure what to make of this. And like, so I ended up going on ADHD medication for a little bit. It helped, but I didn't like it. I was like, wait a second, I like the way my brain worked. What's this whole like one thought, one focus thing? I was like, wait, where are all my other thoughts? But also,
and
but
I
then
think it's almost implied that, like, because I think like one of the kind of, I wouldn't say it's part of Asperger's, but it's an extremely common like later life symptom of people with undiagnosed Asperger's, is because you're not understanding social cues. A lot of times people will, you can get like almost like a PTSD towards social rejection. Because it happens a lot. And so what I've seen in, at least like people that I've known that were, I mean, I feel like I've known a lot of people on I mean, my ex, like the way I figured out was basically my ex and I introduced her to some of my friends, and she was like, they're really sweet people, but why are like 95% of your friends 50 to 70-year-old men with like Asperger's? And I was like, that's a good question. But yeah, it can it'll manifest itself as either like a sort of denial where the person's just going to be sweet all the time and just sort of not acknowledge that the people around them are rejecting them or not understanding what they're saying in some way, or I think the less constructive, I mean, there's a more constructive way than either of these, but the other one is just sort of getting angry at that general feeling in Asperger's is sort of like most social situations, it's like there's this giant inside joke that you're not in on, like you're not quite picking up, and you can figure out how to do that like intellectually, I think, over time. Like I feel like my social skills have improved drastically from when I was like a teenager.
Dan, this is freaking me out. It's like further than that test. So on that test, when I took the Aspie quiz, I scored. Yeah, you said I was 20 points. I was 20 points away from you. So I scored as neuroatypical in a bunch of things, except for some emotional component, and I scored highly on as neurotypical, which was interesting. And I will say that actually, okay, I don't mean this is a humble brag, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, but so I guess I had sort of learned and taught this is blowing my mind what you're saying, because it took me a long time to understand social cues. I still have a hard time with it. I have a hard time with conversations knowing when when there's the right pause in the stuff, and it's okay to start talking or like. But I don't know if
But
it's
I
quiet. I'm
totally
sort of
have that.
explaining.
Like I just talked over you saying that.
But I can be very empathetic. And I'd say not just sympathetic, but empathetic. And I know how much of that is manufactured and how much of that is real. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like it feels performative because it doesn't feel like your natural. Like I think an issue I had a lot in relationships was because I think like a misunderstanding that All About Steve gets right that most of the culture did not get right in 2009 was, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. Uh, this presumption that people on the autism spectrum do not have interior emotional lives because of the fact that they're expressing themselves like there's not a lot of tonal variation in speech.
Right.
There's a lot of like responses to. I mean, this was a huge issue in my last relationship of like, like she would come to me with an emotional problem, and then I would start my answer, and it would be like 30 minutes and require footnotes in my head. It's like, oh, this seems helpful. This is all useful information that could be applied. And she's just sort of like, why is this guy talking about like the history of White Castle hamburgers when I just told him my grandmother died or whatever, right? Right?
Oh God,
like, that never happened, but like,
yeah. Well, that's good that never happened. I'm glad to hear that.
It never got quite that bad, but there were definitely moments where it was. And the other thing is that like most other people that are not on the spectrum are expecting certain performative emotional cues to figure out if somebody is being sincere when they're like giving an apology or something, or they're giving a condolence or something, and it's just not there a lot of the time, right? And so there is that like. You'll get like, and the thing is like, you're not picking up, like you can pick up the hostility, but you're not picking up like the context until you've been through the ringer a few times. Where was I going with that?
Well, you started off talking about the internal emotional life.
Yeah. And so we're not, Mary in the movie is, she clearly has emotional needs, desires, and she has an emotional life. She has emotional responses to things, and she just does not seem to be able to communicate them in a way that's comprehensible to the people around her. And she's also like stuck around people that don't necessarily have her best interests in mind, because she's not picking up on like, oh, Thomas Hayden Church is obviously lying to me, right? Because he's not a good liar.
No, he's awful.
He's awful, but she's not picking up on it. And also like the stubbornness. Like I feel like it thank God it never applied to the level of like All About Steve in my life to like romantic relationships, but that's sort of like finding a subject. Like in the movie, she's really into crosswords. She get like them. Extremely obsessed with a subject until you exhaust it, and then you kind of move on. Like I've done that probably 3 dozen times in my life at this point. Like when I was like 8, I used to memorize the statistics off the back of baseball cards. Like for my birthday, my parents got me a giant encyclopedia, or like a phone book sized book of just baseball statistics, and I would just memorize it for no discernible reason.
Wow, that's amazing.
And you have
go ahead.
Also like her living in space. Like we see her room in her parents' house. Also the fact that she's living with her parents and they don't really pass a lot of judgment on it. Because if she wasn't living with her parents, like without those necessary social skills that she's clearly lacking, she probably wouldn't be able to maintain the job. She probably wouldn't. It's not an awful thing to need help from people if you don't necessarily get certain things. Like it is a disability on some level.
Right. I think it's fair to call it that.
You go into a room and it's it's one of the only movies about somebody that's supposedly obsessed with words or a writer where the person has a lot of books in their room.
Right. We talked, but when we watched Reality Bites, you pointed
Right.
out that the Ethan Hawke character, who was a writer and all that, and knew everything about book, we didn't see a single book. You had
Right.
pointed that out. So,
And she's got books, she's got like weird little knickknacks, and that's definitely a thing I've noticed, because like my friend Dave, who I would like to have on the program at some point, he was also another big, because I made friends with Dave. Dave is this guy in his 60s that's been working on this car that runs on algae for like
cool.
years. And he's like, he's got like he's got enough Asperger's for two people, but I went into his apartment the first time we were hanging out, and it was like this miniature museum. Like he had all these, because he lives near where the GE headquarters used to be, and where the first TV broadcast was. And he had all this crazy stuff, and it was like laid out immaculately in this weird. And I feel like they got that vibe down perfectly in the set in her apartment. Like it looked like part of my house.
It looked like part of what?
It looked like part of my house, basically.
Oh yeah, totally. When I saw that, you even pointed out that she had a wooden cassette.
Yeah, she had a Napa Valley cassette rack.
Yeah. It totally looked like actually the room you just set up, right? Books all over and the tapes. A CRT. There was a small CRT TV on one of the shelves. There was a tuba. Okay, you don't have a tuba, but amongst all the stuff, there's suddenly a tuba. You have an accordion?
I have an accordion.
Oh my God. Do you know how to play?
Not very well, but I can.
Can you play for like 5 seconds?
This is, I'm going to call it avant-garde. Yeah, I could do like shitty Philip Glass, and that's about it.
I'm doing. That's not Philip Glass. That's too fast for Philip Glass, I think.
Yeah, I call that piece Einstein on the couch.
But yeah, it's like the eclectic thing, and it totally reflects her. It reflects to some degree her inner world. But yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying about her. She has a deep emotional life. It's hard for her to convey it externally.
And especially like for the woman in a romantic comedy is usually like a blank. I mean, like in the, the great ones, like It Happened One Night or whatever, they're fairly well developed. But in like a generic crappy rom-com, the woman is essentially this Rorschach blot for the man to project his mother issues and or sexual desires. And, she has her own things going on. She doesn't, getting the guy in the end is not like that doesn't happen. And I mean, she's very independent, and she is an agent of, she's not necessarily working on perfect intel, but she has a lot of agency in the movie. She goes out and, goes after what she wants.
Right.
Isn't ashamed of who she is, and doesn't need a man to validate her. Honestly, this was probably, it doesn't pass the Bechdel test, but
no, it does. It does. When she's driving with I keep forgetting her name, the woman from American Housewife, Katie, when she's with Katie Mixon and DJ Qualls, they're driving in the car from one place to another on this, road out there somewhere in nowhere. And they're talking about clothing at one point. When Katie Mixon says something about there wasn't enough shiny stuff, but thank goodness for the bedazzler.
Right.
They're not talking about Bradley Cooper at that point. They're talking about other stuff.
Oh yeah, and like DJ Qualls isn't in the conversation, so it's sort of like
right. He's sitting in the back seat. He barely says anything.
Mm.
Oh, and there's a tornado and they run into was it a storm drain or something?
Mhm.
To hide in there. So and the car gets thrown up into the sky. She's the one that saves them. And I don't remember what but they're talking, they have the conversation or they're talking about the tornado and being safe, and she shows off. There's also the cicadas are out. It's every 17 years. So suddenly there's a, swarm of cicadas. But they talk about that.
And
they're
and
not
she
talking about a man.
and there and now that I think about like the interior emotion thing, there are a few like the thing that really impressed me at the end of the movie in terms of her interior, or like her emotional intelligence versus like her ability to perform kind of normative social functions. When they get out of the well, she just sort of intuitively understands that Thomas Hayden Church is going to want to take credit for the rescue, and she just sort of accepts that and acknowledges it.
And she helps him. She even
Yeah.
she she wets her fingers with her tongue, and she straightens his hair out a bit so he's camera ready. She helps him be the hero. She's not concerned. She's not interested in being a hero. She's interested in helping the little girl and helping both of them get out of the well. And then when Thomas Hayden Church jumps into it, she's interested in helping him get out of the well. That's her focus. Not seeming like a hero. She's hailed as a hero at the end. They even say her name's Mary, and Hail Mary is
There's so
Chiron.
many great little like gag, like her name is Mary Magdalene Horowitz.
Yeah.
That's fucking hilarious.
And she even says something about her being Jewish Catholic.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great name.
There's so many great subtle gags in this movie too. Like when they're trapped in the sewer pipe during
when the tornado's going by.
Oh yeah, and not even like before then. There's this great like one-off line of it's like some kind of portmanteau of like tornado and it's a tornado cane, right? It's just like they just let that kind of I don't think I caught that the first time I saw it, but they're like gonna die. The guy's car flies off in this tornado like it did in the movie Twister, the one, or not the 86 and the 96 one, and
not the one that we discussed, not the one with Crispin Glover.
Yeah, the disaster flick, not the El Morita movie. And she finds this cicada and she's just like, wow, they only come out and breed once every 17 years. We're incredibly lucky. And then the fucking sewer pipe is like flying off into in a later scene, we see DJ Qualls has somehow made a homemade I Heart Cicadas pin.
Yeah. Right. You had to point it out to me.
Or like every time that Thomas Hayden Church is doing a news broadcast, they have, the little like headline ticker at the bottom, and those things were gold.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I can't remember any of them. I remember one in which
when they're at the protest, it says "Three's a charm?" ? I think.
Yes. Because of the three-legged baby. Yeah. Oh, by the way, that was another time where there was a substantive conversation between two women that was not about a man. When they talk about the little girl, when Katie Mixon is inviting Sandra Bullock to come down and join them in the pro three-leg thing, and she says, well, we have better snacks. So she says, okay, I guess I'm pro leg. But they have the conversation that had nothing to do with man. So wow, there's a number of instances in which that get this to pass the Bechdel test. Again, it's a simplistic test. We all know that, and so on. But still,
there's even like a non-judgmental reference to somebody being born intersex.
That's right. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's totally non-judgmental. That's a really good point. And in fact,
I feel like we get the sense that these news anchor or this news crew, they're kind of all horrible people.
Yeah.
but it's not like, yeah, the more I'm thinking about it, like, yes, it is an over the top comedy, and there's like genre tropes that, I mean, I guess this kind of gets to like an issue with doing comedy about disabilities or things like that, because there's a sort of, I mean, I guess just like speaking as somebody with Asperger's, I think a lot of people are afraid of accidentally being offensive about this stuff. So they're just going to be like, okay, if this is not, like kind of an uplifting narrative about, something vaguely patronizing,
Right.
they're afraid that it's not going to be, if they say that it's good, they're going to be seen as being like ableist or whatever. And I
And
don't
then
know.
their
I
movies.
feel like I wasn't offended at any point by what she was doing. Like, it wasn't all like sunshine and roses or whatever, but there wasn't a point where I was like, oh, they're making fun of her disability. But I felt like,
Yes, I agree. They were not supporting the stalker part, and so it was showing sort of the I don't know what to say, the practical downside.
right. Yeah, they were kind of acknowledging the difficulties, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And near the end in the well, when she's kind of talking half to herself and half to the deaf girl, who actually says at one point, well, she says in sign language, she says, you talk too much.
right.
The girl has no idea what Sandra Bullock is saying, but she says you talk too much.
And that's totally another symptom, right? Like
Yeah.
that was probably the first symptom I noticed, was that like I would start rambling about topics. People would seem to think that I was missing connective words, were having trouble following me. I mean, I still get that to this day, but
Yeah.
and if I got into a mood where I was talking a lot, it like I literally couldn't stop.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing I've noticed with other friends that I've had on the spectrum, is that there is this sort of logorrhea, and I feel like they get that down pretty well in the script.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, and also like drawing. I'm trying to think, like almost benign conspiratorial thinking. Like, there's a lot of points in the movie where she's trying to draw connections between things, like to a point of like not in a sense like she thinks somebody's out to get her, but probably past where you might want to act on, like, shit. She has that conversation with the trucker in the diner, and she's like saying, oh, this is a sign that Steve and I are meant to be together. And the trucker is like, maybe the fact the bus didn't show up is a sign that you should go home or something. And yeah, there's a lot of dialogue about that.
Yeah. It's interesting that some of the stuff that you're describing, like the logorrhea or I saw it. So you're seeing
logorrhea is like a super fancy word for like, you can't shut up, if you didn't get that from the context.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's a good idea to not translate it, to
Logos
define it.
plus diarrhea.
So, speaking of All About Steve.
Speaking of All About Steve, I feel like we haven't quite delved. This feels like the Xanadu episode. Like we got into some like deep, interesting subjects that relate to the movie, but we weren't speaking directly about the movie for a lot of the episode.
Hey, at least we got through the plot.
Yeah, that's true.
We got through the plot early on. I don't know if, there may have been stuff that we missed, or there may have been stuff that I focused on too much when I was describing it, too much detail here and not enough detail there. But we did it. We got through the plot from beginning to end, from opening credits to closing credits.
Yeah, and I think what we were talking about was, because basically, like, the thing at least that I came across, or that I came away with this time watching it, was, yeah, this is a movie about autism. Like, and I, you slowly realize that, like, Curb Your Enthusiasm is a show about autism. Daria is a show about autism.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, Daria is like, she has all the traits.
Yeah.
Um,
I have to assess that. Curb Your Enthusiasm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I totally get that. Daria, there's some, I could see some things that it overlaps with. You know, I have to go watch some Daria. Oh man, I love that show.
that show's so
Um,
cool.
but hey, you know what? You know, you know, we got through the plot
Hmm.
and we got through the plot at the beginning. But
Well,
you know, do you know
okay,
why?
so-
Do you know why we got through the plot?
because you bravely soldiered through it.
Well, no, it's because before the show started, I said, okay, we got to make sure that we start off going through the plot.
Right.
If I hadn't said that, we never would have done it. I'm not saying like, hey, I did it. Not, you know, you didn't do it, I did it. No, it's only because I would have done this, you know, I wouldn't have
That's
gotten
the thing
through
you
it.
bring to the table, because I can't focus long enough to get through the whole plot. Because like
Oh,
I
okay.
feel like a shiny object when I'm describing it. It's like, oh, I have this thought about this thing. All right, let's talk about like 5 minutes into the movie for 30 minutes and then try to get back to it at some point, you know, right?
Right.
And that's probably kind of confusing.
Yeah.
And another thing I'm thinking about is like the incredible negative response to this movie was based around the idea that it was offensive.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, one of the biggest shows on television was The Big Bang Theory, which is basically like the autism equivalent of a minstrel show.
Yeah. It was
Um,
somewhere between, you know, you could call it nerd minstralism or autism minstralism or, you know,
I mean,
Whatever. But
Sheldon
yeah,
is
it was
supposed
minstralism.
to,
What was that?
like Sheldon. Sheldon is entirely just like gawky. He's just a bunch of stereotypes about autism basically put on screen for people to laugh at because he's so awkward.
Right.
And yeah, I mean that show's incredibly offensive, but
Yeah.
or, you know, like how I Met Your Mother was on the air at that point. You basically got like a date rapist as your protagonist.
Yeah. And everybody loved Sheldon, and everybody loved I can't remember the character's name.
Barney.
And everybody loved Barney. And we certainly love Neil Patrick Harris outside of that. And we love Jim who plays Sheldon?
Oh, I can't remember.
Jim Parsons?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And they're both queer. They're both gay. Interestingly enough, but they didn't portray gay characters, and certainly Barney was
with like
gay.
How I Met Your Mother, like I was, whenever I think about that show again, because I was watching it when it was on, like in the back of my head, like is he playing against type or is he gay washing?
Playing again? Wait, which character? Which show?
Neil Patrick Harris on How I Met Your Mother.
Is he playing against type or is he gay washing? What do you mean by gay washing in this context?
So
because the character, wait, I just want to say, because the actor is gay, but the character was
not. The character was supposed to be like the most stereotypically straight guy or whatever.
Right.
Imagine the character is portrayed as like this lovable scamp when really he's lying to women, he's getting them drunk so he can sleep. He's a date rapist.
Yeah.
And so but nobody's the fact that Neil Patrick Harris was, publicly out of the closet made people not, or I think that was an element of people not realizing like, oh, holy shit, this guy's a horrendous. I mean, everybody on that show basically is a horrendous human being.
Right.
And especially like when I was in college and that show was like huge. I knew tons of people that I went to school with where they were like, oh, this guy is like a role model. Like I'm going to stop being a dork, and I'm going to be an alpha male. I'm going to be a Chad, and I'm going to make these women like me. This, that, or the. I'm not going to let these like women control me or whatever. And
oh God.
And the thing is that the show encourages that interpretation. It does not judge him for his behavior. It does not. It's just sort of like, oh, that's who he is. And the fact that Neil Patrick Harris lent his credibility and the he didn't, the character should not have been likable. Like an honest portrayal of that character should not have, it should have been disturbing.
So I disagree with you a little bit about the show not judging him. I think it did, and it portrayed him not just as a scamp, but it was clear that he was a cad, but he was a lovable cad. But that the elements in which he was a cad, they were you know, they were wrong in a sense. But it did not portray him. It did not convey the notion or judge him as a date rapist, right? It
Right,
was
even though he's doing
still,
it-
it's not so bad. It's kind of like, oh God, it's kind of wrong the way he acts, and it's so he's deceptive and all that, but not to the degree that he was a rapist. Sorry, we just been saying date rapist.
and
I don't know. We said it like 20 times.
totally is, and even the narrative of the show is basically set up as like Ted Mosby or whatever does not. Ted Mosby secretly aspires on some level to be Barney.
Yeah, okay. I'll buy that.
That was the vibe I got in the show. But he's not as, I don't want to say good at it, but you know, but like later on, you're kind of like, oh my God, this man is incredibly shallow. All of these ideas about like, I need to go after this woman because she might be the one true love of my life. He doesn't have an excuse. He's not like Sandra Bullock in this movie. He doesn't necessarily mean well by it, and it's just this unhealthy, like, weird fixation. Like I don't think it's healthy for people to think like, oh, there's like one person in the entire universe I'm supposed to be with.
Now, confession, I binge watched How I Met Your Mother, all like 9 seasons or 7 seasons or whatever it is.
Oh yeah, I watched the whole thing when it was on, and
it was hilarious.
Like the Onion AV Club was like, oh, this is a classic sitcom. They're playing around with chronology and everything, but they're not. That was before analyzing this stuff through like a lens of, you know, gender roles and stuff was in vogue. That was kind of like the last gasp of the 90s.
And when I first read it, I don't remember if you said it or somebody else said it and explained it in those terms, just mentioned it. And I went and read up about it, and I was like, because my first reaction was almost defensive. Was like, no, that's not at all. No, it's funny and all that. And like, no, he's kind of like, he's this lovable cad. I'm taking it further. He's not a lovable scamp, but he's a full cad, full on cad. But it took me a little bit, and you know, it's more reading up and thinking about it. It's like, oh my God, he's an awful person, and they're complicit.
I told her I was an astronaut. I fucked her without a condom, and then I put her down a trap door in my apartment.
Was that really an episode or his description of something?
They definitely had the trap door thing at one point. They definitely had the, you know what it is? He's like an ISIS cat. You have like the most hardcore misogyny mixed with like aggressive, you know, he's drawing these parallels between capitalist ideology and just outright misogyny. But we see him doing all these like childish, endearing behaviors, right? Like he loves going to the laser tag arena. He's got all this like weird Star Wars shit in his apartment or whatever, right? To make it seem cute and approachable.
Right. And you've got people from ISIS as part of the recruitment. They had pictures on, I don't remember if it's Instagram or Twitter or whatever, in which they were pictured with cats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I see the parallel. That's, I like that. So, but Big Bang Theory, I also watched, I don't know how many seasons, but I didn't watch it through the end because it was maybe about halfway through that I first had the realization. Somebody had to realize it for me and tell me, and then I started realizing like, oh my God, this is geek minstralism. Or I never thought of it as autism minstrel, as an minstrel autism. What's the right phrase?
I always call it autism minstrel, but that's a me phrase. I don't think anybody else uses that term.
But I've heard it as geek or nerd. Maybe not minstralism, but whatever. But just the fact that it actually is mocking them. It is not compassionate. Not compassionate in any sense, not as part of that. That is just mocked. That part of it, you know. But now I see it that way. Actually, so like, I learned about that. I learned about that in the middle of the show, and I stopped. I think that's why I stopped watching it. I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
Oh no, yeah. I think like I saw like 2 or 3 episodes of it because I was following the Onion AV Club because they had those like TV reviews all the time, and they had like decent people they had better writers on them, I think, then, or maybe editorial gave the writers more leeway.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want to immediately blame the writers, but the quality of that site has declined drastically over the last 15 years.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's still some great stuff on there, like actually, the what's her face that came to Degrassi Club once, her brother writes for the AV Club a lot, and he does some really interesting stuff. Jesse Hassinger.
Oh, neat.
But yeah, the first few times I saw it, because I mean, I think I also, like, when I'm watching movies, most of my initial, like, self-training of how to analyze movies came from Ray Carney writing about John Cassavetes. And the biggest thing that Carney repeats over and over again in the 3 or 4 books that he wrote about John Cassavetes was that the value of Cassavetes' films was his complete lack of judgment of the characters. In, like, this kind of, he walks this tightrope of, he's not letting them off the hook, but he's just sort of observing behavior.
Okay.
And Carney takes that to be like kind of a deep humanism, like he's accepting the person on a deep level, which I think was kind of the frame I was going for with the explaining Sandra Bullock in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it accepts her, it doesn't whitewash her flaws, but it still accepts that there's, you know, value there, and, you know, she's a person who has feelings and deserves respect and whatnot. And yeah, the first time I ever saw The Big Bang Theory, I was just like, wow, whoever writes this show hates people, like, on this deep, like, antisocial level.
Uh-huh.
And that was the vibe I got, and I could never go back to it. Yeah, and I think like Freaks and Geeks handled that storyline, because they had that, like, a very similar storyline where there's, like, the what is it? There's the bully kid that keeps, like, picking on Bill, the Martin Starr character, and the geeks are they're all getting ready to go to the sci-fi convention, and the bully puts peanut butter in Bill's lunch, which almost kills him because he's got a peanut butter allergy. And then at the end of it, they have this, like, they have this moment, and Bill realizes that the thing that this kid wants, he's bullying them because he wants to be their friend, and he's frustrated that they don't get it, and he doesn't have the social skills to reach out any other way.
Okay.
And they end up going to the sci-fi convention together, and it's like, I don't know if you remember that episode, but I thought that was, like, really well done.
I don't remember that episode, but I'm thinking of, in sort of a similar sense, is, okay, as by the way, side note, this is a great show. It's only 1 season. It's Judd Apatow's one of, you know, early thing, and a lot of the people that you might recognize from his, not posse, but, you know, the folks that he has in there.
Yeah,
Jason
that's where
Segel.
James Franco.
Yeah. Oh, I was saying Jason Segel, James Franco, Seth Rogen, and all those folks. But the episode I was thinking of, so just remind me, there's one character who I think he's kicked out of his house, and he ends up staying with like his girlfriend or something, like his girlfriend's house. They're all in high school.
Yeah, it's, the Jason Segel character gets kicked out, and then he's staying with Linda Cardellini, Lindsay Weir. He's staying with the Weirs, and then he's just sort of like, it's the first time that he's been around, like, a like, not dysfunctional father figure, and he's and she kind of realizes, and I probably did this when I was in high school once or twice, but she realized, like, oh, he's in love with the idea of, like, a stable family,
right? But so there's there's the brother, maybe he's the younger brother, who's like one of the nerds, right?
Yeah. What's his name? He co-wrote Horrible Bosses later.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, yeah. Wow. But he ends up playing D&D with them.
Yeah.
The final
episode when James Franco figures out, like, oh, okay, I enjoy playing D&D, and there's that, like, really sweet montage that the series ends with.
Yeah.
Like Lindsay going off to go see the Grateful Dead, or tour around the Grateful Dead. and then yeah, and James Franco he's not worried about his like cool guy image, and he's just enjoying playing D&D with these.
Well,
it's the dweebs.
It's the jock, yeah, dweebs, right? The freaks and the geek, so it's the jock and the geeks that are, I want to say the word accepting isn't quite right here, not tolerating, somewhere between that and.
Yeah, they find common ground. They learn how to appreciate each other, which is like not. I feel like that's a pretty safe narrative move to make. Like that rarely ever comes across badly.
Yeah. So I was speaking of All About Steve. I think
that's kind of how All About Steve ends, right? Like they, they're both kind of doing, things that aren't necessarily the most functional, and then they kind of realize, like, oh, okay, there's
everybody learns to appreciate her.
Yeah,
and the movie teaches us how to appreciate her.
Mm.
Wow. Oh my God. I'm liking this movie so much more now, even more. It's not just really funny and all that. It's like such a beautiful message. Why does it only have 6% on Rotten Tomatoes? That is so wrong.
No idea.
94% of people are wrong about this movie.
Right. I don't get it, because there were so many worse movies around then. Like there were so many, but yeah, like I don't know, for whatever reason, everybody decided to gang up on this movie.
Yeah. Oh, well, wow, we got an awful lot out of this movie. We discussed it somewhat well, and then we went off on a tangent and all, and really there was some deep psychological discussions going on here. But
it's
look
a secretly deep movie.
What was that?
It's a secretly deep movie. Like
it is.
It doesn't like insist upon itself when it's doing it, but everything is carefully and well observed and carefully observed.
Yeah. And the writer, especially, and the director have done very little since then, and certainly nothing of note. And I'm guessing part of it is because it was panned so heavily and probably killed a possibly nascent career.
Yeah, like the director does a great job too. Like there's nothing that flashy, but when a gag needs to be sold, it's positioned correctly and it lands. If the director had a lot of influence over the actors in the production, everybody does an exceptionally good job in roles that we wouldn't necessarily associate them with.
Right. Right. Bradley Cooper's the closest. Well, no, he's never portrayed actually. No, he's not a bad guy and all that. He's actually kind of freaked out. That's the thing. Actually, that's it. We see him a little more freaked out than we've seen him before, I think. So, or in general.
Yeah, he's responding to the weirdness instead of trying to think about the situation. It's think about what is the other person's motivation. Why are they doing this?
Well, he's responding to her stalking him.
Right.
So,
and, he's reasonable in that. Like she's walking along with a fucking moving car.
Right. She's the one being unreasonable.
Mm.
In all practical sense, right?
Yeah.
Whatever her motivation is, I don't know how to describe it, but yeah. Again, like I say, it's non-judgmental. Well, no, I just used the word unreasonable. That's somewhat judgmental. No, but I think it's fair having
it. It doesn't let them off the hook for the ways that they misbehave, but it doesn't, throw them in the wastebasket of history because it feels betrayed by their behavior. And I think that's a sign of like emotional maturity in a film.
Yeah, because she's misbehaving in that scene when she's running next to the moving van.
Oh yeah, I mean she's like doing all kinds of crazy shit, but it's but the film is like, okay, it's concerned about why she's doing it. It's not gawking at it. Yeah. It's not spectacle. And
I don't want to use the word compassionate because I don't think that's quite right, but it's appreciative. It's appreciative. Oh, you used the word appreciate earlier. So yeah, it's with the D&D and Freaks and Geeks that they learn to appreciate each other. So here the filmmakers are appreciative of the characters.
You don't get the sense that the director or the writer dislikes any of these characters.
Yeah. Which you can see in movies where they dislike them, even characters that are likable, or they may have their issues and they dislike them for that.
I mean, the Coen brothers hate every single person in their movies, right? Like Fargo is a movie about a bunch of people who like die gruesome deaths and deserve it, and it explains to us why they deserve it.
Okay.
But there's no redemptive qualities to be shown about humanity in the movie Fargo. At least as I mean, I guess like Frances McDormand, there's sort of like a quiet domesticity and like a little bit of or like Big Lebowski, Big Lebowski. I feel like every single person that is like an angry caricature. Except for the dude.
I'm going to respectfully disagree. I agree with some of the stuff you say in terms of the character's behavior. In my gut, I disagree with the notion that the Coen brothers hate their characters, but that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, maybe we can. My friend Pete is like a huge Coen brothers guy, so maybe when we get him on here at some point.
Now, Blood Simple, I may go along with in that, but that's also well, anyways.
Or like Barton Fink, like everybody sucks, and then the hotel burns down.
Yeah. So this is a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
But anyways, do you have any final thoughts on All About Steve?
Go watch this. This is a legitimately good movie, and 10 years later, I still don't get the backlash.
And my final thoughts are exactly what Dan said. That was an easy one. Thank you for articulating it for both of us.
Yeah. If you like this, you want more of it, you want to hear more about movies, TV, we do interviews. I do little videos about weird objects. Sometimes there's a lot of fun stuff on this channel. Hit like, hit subscribe, helps us out. Nobody likes talking into the void. So yeah, if you're feeling it, do it.
That sounds great.
Cool. And we won't think you're stalking us.
And if you do want to stalk us, I don't know.
I mean, if Sandra Bullock wants to stalk me in red boots, like, that's the definition of a first world problem.
I forgot. I was meaning to say this earlier a number of times, and I forgot to say it. We both, 5 minutes into the movie, we both fell in love with her. And we both said this, all right, oh my God, I'm falling in love.
Yeah, like, oh my God, yeah, she's like, because she does have, and I think that like Sandra Bullock does, she gives a great performance in this movie because she manages to, she's not cutting corners. Like the person is who she is, but she also sells like the charm of her being who she is.
Right.
Even it's clear it's not that normal.
It's clear that she appreciates the character that she's portraying.
Yeah. And
all right. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. You want to do it this time?
No, I was gonna say in the usual order. Go ahead and tell us who you still are.
So I'm still Dan,
and I'm still Ron,
and that's still the like and subscribe button. And we'll see you next week.
All right, take care, everyone.